Welcome to episode 5 of the Game Week podcast powered by Keros, the number one solution for maximising preparation and performance in elite sport. I'm your host, Andrew Trimble. Every episode will be taking a deep dive behind the scenes of the elite sports world as we chat with key stakeholders in high performance environments about their stories and how they manage their game week. This week we've got Julia Simic. Julia currently plays for AC Milan. She started her career back in 2005 with Bayern Munich and went on to make 105 appearances for the first team. Since then, Julia has played for Potsdam, Wolfsburg and Freiburg in Germany, then over to West Ham United in the Women's Super League. Julia's been successful wherever she's been, winning the Frauen Bundesliga, the Bundesliga Cup, and made it to the Women's FA Cup final with West Ham. She's represented Germany at almost every age grade, including 2 caps for the senior team. Julia, welcome along to the Game Week podcast powered by Keros. How are you today?
I'm really, really good today. I'm sitting in the sun basically in Milan and we have nice weather. Probably better than yours, right?
It is. That's a little bit cocky of you to start, Julia. It is. Your weather's always going to be better than ours, let's face it.
Probably. That's why I really like obviously to be here in Italy.
Oh, brilliant. Let's start really basic. This is how we start all the podcasts. But why do you do what you do, Julia?
First of all, I think I would call myself really lucky to be able to do what I just love the most in life. And that's obviously playing football. And I'm not just doing this for the last 5 years or something. I basically play football since I can walk and run and think. And I think it's such a big privilege to just be able to, call it your profession one day when you just did it always as your hobby. And I would still call it playing football. I would still call my hobby. I'm just lucky enough to, live from that.
So you're a football family then. You're kind of through and through a football fan, and there was always going to be one goal, and it was to be a professional footballer. Is that fair enough? Kind
of. Like, it's not like my parents dragged me into football and I have no other choices. I would say it's definitely the environment that makes you what you become, in which you grow up. And I have an older brother, that obviously helps a lot. If you really follow that dream of becoming a football player, if you just have the opportunity every day basically to play football. And then my father, even my mom, like we were just spending weekends in the park also during the week, and there would be always a ball lying there, and instead of just throwing it, I would always kick it, and I would really enjoy it as well. And I think at one point you just realize that there's also talent, and what you do is kind of successful, and you get better and you basically achieve what you want to achieve. And I think that brings a lot of motivation as well. And I think then it just becomes a natural dream, I would say, to get better and better to a level when you can even say, okay, this might even be enough to reach a professional level.
I'm keen to have a chat about that transition. Whenever you made the decision to turn pro, got the opportunity to turn pro. The rugby context, well, my background's rugby, and same thing as you, growing up, loving rugby, just playing rugby for a hobby, playing rugby for fun, and then turning professional and realizing I'm still trying to have fun, but it's a job. How did you find that transition? Do you try and convince yourself or remind yourself that this is fun, this is a game that I play for fun, now it just happens to be my job as well?
Definitely. I think that's important as well, because sometimes I even experience myself being stressed and just so unrelaxed with everything, because there's pressure, of course, and mainly it's your own pressure you put on yourself. And yes, there's this professional environment around you that also puts kind of a pressure on you. But at the end of the day, I think we all perform better if we just enjoy what we do and have fun out there, even if that sounds maybe not professional sometimes, but I think it's the best way to handle pressure sometimes, when you just try to enjoy it. Because I always feel when I'm on the pitch and I'm playing football and I'm just having fun, I perform the best. And I think everyone knows that kind of flow moment where you just do everything naturally and you don't think about what you do. You're always in the right place and you're kind of a magnet for the ball as well. It's just everything comes natural. And reaching that moment is my main goal in a game, for example, just enjoying it. And I always say to my teammates when we clap hands before we go out, have fun, enjoy it. And I think there's something, especially when you play maybe in front of a big crowd or people are coming to watch you, or they are sitting at home in front of the TV and watching you, and you might not perform the best. But then sometimes you hide yourself a little bit on the pitch and you don't want to have every ball anymore and you're not sure what to do with the ball. And then I always think, all right, but why are you even playing? It's just because it's fun, right? It's fun to have the ball on your feet. It's not just fun to run around without ever touching the ball. And it's fun to win a tackle and just throw yourself into these actions again. And that's my best way to make it back into the game as well if I didn't find the access yet. So I think that's good to know that your head is the key as well to enjoy, right? So if your head's not working well, you won't find the access to the game. So as soon as you enjoy and you have fun, I think you just perform better.
Yeah, even the fact that you reiterate it when everybody's got their hands in, or you're in the team huddle, or you remind each other, let's have fun. That shows that potentially with professionalism, it doesn't always come naturally. The emphasis needs to be, let's make sure we have fun. Let's be proactive about having fun and enjoying a sport that we play. So that's obviously part of your philosophy, I suppose, and maybe your philosophy has changed throughout your career. Have there been any significant influences that have impacted that philosophy or kind of let you see the game in a different way at all?
Yeah, definitely. I would say the biggest impacts were injuries. When it was taken from you, the game, and you couldn't do anything against it because you were just injured and you couldn't go out and play anymore. You couldn't train anymore. It's your whole schedule is changing. You're still in rehab and you're still active, but you can't basically do what you love and what you're paid for as well. And I think these moments make you realize, and also making you realize that it's not for granted to just be out there and play football, right? And I think always, like with all my comeback games, they are basically my best experiences, whether that was a Champions League final or Champions League semi-final, or we won a cup, whatever. It was always the most emotional moments were coming back from long injuries. And I think that says a lot, because finally you can do again what you love so much, right? And then you go out there and you're under pressure and you're stressed and you don't enjoy it. And I always thought that's the wrong mentality. That's the wrong way to take it. And before my first injuries, I was always so driven and so focused on reaching this and going to the next level and going back to the national team and things like this. Whereas I forgot a little bit to also enjoy the good side of playing football. Just be able to wake up and not going to your job or in the office or whatever. You basically just go and to your teammates, to your friends, to your family, as many people call it as well. And you're able to play football, to do a strength session, to be in the gym, to have a laugh in the dressing room, and all these little things. I think we sometimes forget in our daily rush how we deal with things. But I think it's important to remind yourself on how lucky we actually are.
Yeah, so obviously we're tapping into your mindset a bit there, and we're getting an understanding into how important it is for you to play with a smile on your face and enjoy it. That's really quite hard to do, though. Whenever there's a lot of people talk, about high performance environments and being kind of target driven and leadership and teamwork and all these kind of slightly pretentious conversations that happen, but there's some really simple principles here. Go out, smile, enjoy the game of football, and do it because we love this game, because we played it growing up. With that in mind, it's difficult to always have that mindset, especially when you're faced with injuries and you've encountered your fair share of injuries. What are the most difficult injuries? What are the most difficult periods? And what have you learned through those? And in particular, I'd like to talk about injuries with no light at the end of the tunnel, like a lot of uncertainty there's no, I'm definitely going to be back in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is. I know you've experienced a couple of injuries where it's hard to keep upbeat because it's a long-term injury and you don't know when the end is going to come.
And to be honest, there are no better or worse injuries. Like, all of the injuries are not nice, but I definitely agree on it's easier to go through an injury where, this ligament will grow back probably in 2 to 6 weeks. And, at this time, you might be back playing and there's not something special turning up all of a sudden. Whereas I suffered from a cartilage injury and cartilage pain basically in my knee. And that's something completely different, because you don't know, actually, you don't have a timeline. You don't have that certain date in your head where, I'll do this step, and this step. And in 4 and 6 and 8 weeks, months, whatever, you're back playing, you're back on the pitch. And I think not seeing this light at the end of the tunnel is the worst part. But also with for example, I had 2 ACL injuries, and you also know a little bit the timetable of an ACL injury recovery, right? It's still there. Every rehab is different. And I think it's really, I wouldn't recommend it to go by these exact timetables, because everyone's healing differently. And I think that's so important to do it in your own speed and in your own tempo. Even if there might be people out there playing after 4.5 months after an ACL injury, for example. It might not be for everyone, definitely not. And what I've learned was taking your steps in your own time without rushing and without looking left and right. You have to find your own way through that. And yes, I agree, especially at the beginning of injuries when you're in pain and you can't do a lot. I was suffering a lot at these times, because you couldn't get rid of your energy, basically. You couldn't move. You couldn't do what you like the most. And that's also like a hard session where you just feel tired afterwards, and not having that anymore is really, it's painful as well, right? Mentally. And I think what we said earlier, you can trick your brain a little bit by just smiling and trying to be positive. And all of a sudden you believe it. You believe it's not that bad. And sometimes you need someone as well around you that just sits you down. At least it was with me like this, and says, look, you're still healthy in a certain way. You still have a great life. You have a hard time, yes, but you have to make sure you go through there with the best possible mindset, and don't let it get too much to your head. And all of a sudden you find again the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's not just focusing on the 8 months, it's focusing on each week, focusing on little steps, like these little, setting your goals, but in shorter steps. I think that's really important, because you actually have little, moments of success, even in a recovery or even a rehabilitation. And I think that's important, that people also show you the positive sides you're just going through. And I think it's everyone is dealing really different with it. For me, it was always the best thing to take it positive, and to have positive people around me as well.
It's short-term goals, little moments of success, isn't it? You mentioned something there. We try and trick our brains by smiling. I think that's an interesting conversation. Can you unpack that a little bit more? I would imagine it's easier to trick your brain into smiling by smiling. That's maybe why you moved to Milan, because the weather's nicer. It's easier to trick your brain whenever you genuinely are happy.
When I see the sun, I'm just smiling naturally. I can't do anything against it. It's just my natural trigger for smiling. It does. It has an impact though. So I've seen guys that I know well. I've seen them go out onto a rugby pitch, and behave in a certain way at the start of the game. And I know what they're doing. I always find it very difficult to do, but I know they're just trying to trick themselves into feeling more confident, feeling more able, trick themselves into be more excited about what is potentially a daunting task. So you've obviously tapped into a similar kind of philosophy. Yeah, like, to be honest, I've met a lot of different characters as well. I would say there are different also like leader in a team, and they might lead completely different. And I think it's always a little bit how you deal with your own stress. There are these really loud people on the pitch that also have to push others just to make themselves feel better. I think for example, like this, if I don't speak, something's wrong with me on the pitch. If I stop communicating basically with the people around me, then I'm not in the game, and I might need someone who's pushing me to be back in the game. And there might be people who are more negative, who are more positive, who are more loud, quiet. I think there's so many different characters, but also ways to deal with your pressure and with your stress on the pitch. I always loved it when I looked around and someone gives me like a positive non-verbal signal, and like if it's just head nodding or something, like come on, or clapping hands, or the next one, whatever, little moments like this, for me they are really important. Might not work for everyone like this, but this makes me maybe smile again. And look, you always have these little moments when the ball goes over the outline or something like this, where you have a moment to think. And I always use them to be like, okay, have a good conversation with yourself, and a positive one, and get yourself quickly on a reset mode, that you know the next action will be successful, that you know you're doing this and this. And I think these self-talks are really important as well. And I think everyone is completely different on this, but it's nice to find out also about maybe other strategies from other people. Who are they dealing, or how are they dealing with certain situations, to just maybe adapt to this or take something from them for your own game.
Yeah, it's. I always find it interesting to imagine that spectators and people watching on TV, to imagine that they could see or read or hear my thoughts whenever I'm on the pitch. If they knew what was going on in my head, if they knew the battle, the struggle, the kind of me trying to fool myself, trying to trick myself, trying to just find ways to tap into something. And every, like, all the conversation nowadays is about high performance mindset and being really kind of strong, and just being really kind of proactive about your thoughts. It's a minefield in there for me anyway. For me, it was a minefield of just always trying to kind of second guess myself. So that's a battle that I think the best performers, they win that battle. But anyway, let's shift context a little bit, Julia. Obviously, when things are difficult with injury, there's a mindset around that, and kind of getting back and keeping a smile and keeping proactive about getting back to fitness. But for you, it must have been frustrating breaking through in the club scene, and it taken a long time for that first international cap to come. How did you find that process? Did you ever doubt yourself? Did you ever imagine this is never going to happen? And then how did it feel whenever it finally did happen?
I would definitely say, when I look back, these years with not being called up, and I think I have to tell a little story behind that, but these were the years where I felt the most pressure on myself, because that was my goal. I always wanted to play for my country in the senior team, and not only the youth teams, because I would go through all the youth teams, and it always would look like the logical next step to make it to the senior team as well. And I got the first call up when I was 21, and in the first session I ruptured my ACL after 45 minutes in the training, and that was maybe the worst timing to get injured that bad, but also maybe a good timing as well, because I felt like I made it already, so I can make it again. And it's probably, I've been seen already. I've been there where I always wanted to be. So that was my motivation in the next 6-7 months, to throw everything into this and all my effort to make it back to the national team, right? So after 6.5 months, I think I gave my comeback. I was flying through my rehab. I scored even a goal in my comeback game. And that was all, like, everything seemed to be really easy. And then after 7 months, so 2 weeks after my comeback game, I re-ruptured my ACL. And that obviously threw me off a little bit, because that you knew the process, you knew what you have to go through again, and you knew it's going to take a lot longer than probably the first rehab took. And knowing all of that, and people around you who would question and doubt, and why you would rush through the rehab, and what were the mistakes, and will you even make it back again? And there was a lot of a negative cloud around me, in terms of, even if it was just comments, but these comments, like they're doing something to you. So you definitely have to find your mindset in this moment as well, and to make it back on track. But I think that's making or doing something with you. And still after that, my goal was still going back to the national team. It also meant like I was out basically for 2 years completely. And to be honest, I came back quite well. I even changed club at this time. I was invited for all the fitness tests from the national team, but I never got the call up for a game or for a training camp. And that was frustrating at the same time, because I felt I'm playing on a really high level now. I'm winning titles. I'm starting in good clubs as well. But there was something that would just not, and that's something you can't influence, right? It would just not happen, and frustrates you. And you always think when you go into a game, today is an important game. Maybe the national team coach is on the trip in the stands and watching the game. And these little things always put me under pressure. And right now, I would say, looking back, I regret that a little bit, because just influence what you can influence, right? And not more, because you can't basically make it happen if it shouldn't be for you. And then the national team coach changed when I was 26. And this is basically when I got my first proper call up for a team camp, where I actually gave my debut then. I think it was then with 26 already, but it took a while. But it was also, I wouldn't even say I enjoyed that so much. It was more like a big relief. Like finally all the pressure like went down from all these couple of years where I was just grafting and wishing for that to happen.
There's a lot of guys in Irish rugby who have got one cap, one international cap. So there'd be a big thing in Irish rugby where if you get one international cap, it's not relief, it's pressure to get out of the one cap club. So a lot of guys actually feel more pressure to get their second cap and to kick on. So there's an interesting kind of mindset.
I'm really happy
there.
because I made the second cap as well. So
yes, you're in the two cap club.
Yay.
Yeah. What club were you playing for then when you got your first cap?
I was playing for Wolfsburg at this time, and Wolfsburg is basically the most successful team in Germany. Back then, we were just basically winning the national titles like cups and the league title as well, and we were qualified for the Champions League final and all of that. And basically, when the national team came to a team coach came to a game from us, I injured myself on the ankle, and I knew I needed a surgery. And she would still come to me and say, "Look, I'll definitely have you on my radar, and as soon as you're back playing, I'll call you up. So don't worry, do your rehab properly this time, and I'm gonna call you up." So my injuries were really, I would never say this is because I was injured, or it didn't happen really because I was injured, but they always came to a really strange timing. So it was never really, there's not a good timing for an injury, but I think there are bad timings for injuries, and that definitely always happened to a really bad time. But still, like, she would stick to her promise, and she would invite me to the next camp. And yeah, luckily she also let me play twice.
You after Wolfsburg, you moved to Freiburg, and then after that, you moved to West Ham. Did you feel like going to West Ham, you mightn't have been on her radar as much, or it might be more difficult for you for them to be aware of your performances?
By that time, I just turned 29, and I felt a little bit like the team coach changed again already. So I made a couple of team camps. I played twice at least, and they weren't really successful at this time. I missed the Euros because I was injured again. I was out again for, I think, 3 months. And she said, "Look, I can't nominate you for that because you're just not playing at the moment." And it's always a difference if I'm the team captain of the national team, or if I'm basically a two cap player at this time, right? So I didn't have that standing to just be naturally in the squad. So I had to at least play to get my nomination. And that's what I mean. Like, these injuries just always happen to timings when I was really close to jump on that train, as we would say in German. But yeah, I felt like it's time for me to I've seen Germany, every single club, every single pitch, at least 14 years at this time. And I felt like I need something new. I just need to experience something else. And I wanted also to use football a little bit for my personal experience, to get in touch with a new culture, maybe to a new football philosophy, and also to a new country, learn a new language. Even if my English is still not perfect, but at least we can have that podcast together. But I felt like it's just time to leave Germany a little bit behind and start my own journey a little bit through Europe. And West Ham at this time was just brilliant, because I was thinking, okay, I'm going to a really sunny place somewhere in south of Europe and just be next to the beach. I just got my convertible car, and at this time, so I would just put everything in my convertible car and drive to England with my convertible car. But at least I had a really nice summer there. Basically, the league, the WSL, just turned into a professional league. That was the biggest advantage at this time for me to go to England, because it was just the place to be. Everything would be professional, the environment, the pitches were great, the staff was there. I think I never worked with more people in terms of the staff like I did at West Ham and all the other teams. Like, England is just football history as well. Like, when you see all the clubs playing there, Chelsea and Man City and Man United and Arsenal, West Ham, Tottenham, these are just great names to directly connect with football, right? And I just wanted to experience this for me as well.
I'm sure it was an amazing experience. And it seemed like, from seeing some of your other interviews, it seemed like moving away from West Ham for you was a really tough time. You were really kind of plugged into that team, and it meant a lot to you. That was a difficult period for you, was it?
Definitely. And I think the hardest one out of all the moves I made so far and leaving clubs, that was really, it felt like we were a family there. Especially, like, I played there 2 seasons, and the second season we had such an, I would say, extraordinary team spirit like I've never experienced before. And yes, it's sometimes a little bit, the more successful you are and the more professional you are and the bigger goals you have as a team, the harder it gets a little bit to have a great team spirit. I think that makes a difference sometimes. If you win all the titles, or if you don't, even if you have the quality, like, how good is the team in terms of their team spirit as well. And with West Ham, even if we wouldn't play for, don't know, the league title or the qualifying for the Champions League, for example, but we would still be such a great group of people, and we would make it to the FA Cup final, for example, in the first year. So there was quality, definitely, but I think we were just so lucky to have each other. We were, I think, 15 different nations in this team, and all we had was us. Like, everyone would come from abroad, whether that was Canada or South Korea or Germany or Switzerland or wherever. We were there, and we were really looking after each other. And I think that's also contributing a little bit to the coach and manager. He would really look after that as well, to have that element in his team as well, that the team is working well together. And that made it, for me, that was a completely new experience, the way he led us as a team. And for me, for my future, maybe for my future career as a coach as well, I want to take a lot from that personal or human side that Matt Beard, the coach from West Ham, brought into this team.
Okay, that's great. So tapping into that human side, this has been a bit of a theme through Keros podcast, actually, just talking about that human side. And obviously, being part of the human side is having interests and not just being single-minded and completely focused on football, having interests outside of football. You've developed your own football training app. You were talking about, potentially you'd like to become a coach at some stage or transition, after playing. Tell us a little bit about your football app. Who's it for, and what does it do?
It's mainly for girls, for young girls that have the ambition to reach basically their best level. And that doesn't naturally have to be becoming a professional footballer. It just has to be an inner drive to get better and become better and to want to train better as well. So when I look back and think back when I was 12 to 16, and I just took a ball and would kick it for hours against the wall, for example, with no one really telling me, look, work on your dribbling, work on your whatever speed, and combining speed with technique, for example. That's just this guidance I just want to a little bit provide with this app, that young girls who might not have the best guidance around them or the best coaches around them, and they want to do more maybe than others around them, that they have a little bit of guidance, that they know, okay, there's a mix of exercises every week that's changing every week. You have also a fitness side of that area that's covered. So they also get in a good shape where they just better prevented from injuries, for example, which is really important, especially for girls. You also have this interaction bit. So there is a vlog on this app as well, where I'm just giving insights about my life, about my experience, about my way of cooking healthy snacks, for example, without being a haute cuisine cook. But also there's an online session that they can participate or join every single week, which makes it more personal. So you're actually able to give feedback to the next generation. And that's what I basically love the most is working with them, not maybe one-to-one, but you have a group of people. And I think the last year showed us that Zoom calls can be really beneficial for different things, and to be connected with people still, even if you can't really meet them in person. But I think in total, it's, at least in my opinion, a really good tool to work on different areas while growing up and getting a little bit of guidance by someone who already made it through these stages.
Yeah, and for you personally, developing something that's just slightly away from the day to day, worrying about performance and everything going towards the game. I'm sure it was nice to have, I'm not going to trivialize it by saying a distraction, but another project, something that you could be interested in, I'm sure. But Julia, let's get into the game week. So we're quite interested in the run up to a game and the mindset of athletes in that process. Give us a bit of insight into your mindset in the run up to a game. What are the key focuses for you in the run up to a match?
I think at the beginning of the week, always it's about analyzing the previous games, and that might not always be really enjoyable because there also I realize or experience that when you didn't perform well and you even lost as well, that you sometimes don't want to be confronted with this anymore. You just want to basically throw it off and never think about it anymore. But I think that's a really important process.
That's when you need the sun to shine, Julia.
Exactly. Then it's at least easier to go to that video meeting when you're driving there with a little bit of sun through your window. But yeah, definitely that's the hardest bit, I would say, to face also like the not so successful moments sometimes, but also it's important to make the next step, right? And to get better and just develop. And then I would say the closer it gets towards the game, obviously you're more focused, especially in training, on tactical areas and the opponent you're playing against. And I think everyone in terms of getting ready for a game works completely different. For example, when we just say about gym training, I know I'm not doing legs anymore and on a Friday or Saturday when we play on Sunday. And I think that's just everybody's body works as well a little bit different. And I think in a football team where you have basically 24 people, individuals, you can't just make a plan for everyone. I think it's so important to also let individual, just preferences, access to this as well. And if a player says, look, I don't want to do legs today because I don't feel like this, I feel tired, I feel sore, whatever, I think that's something where coaches have to be a bit more aware and let the player's voice count a little bit more as well and give it more weight. Because sometimes I feel like, okay, there's a handed plan and you just do it, whether that's good for you or not. So I'm basically at a point where I say, look, that's not good for me today, and I know that, and can I have something else, or can I do something else? And already knowing what would be good for me. I think that's a process as well, but I think there are a lot of things coming together to prepare well, whether that's try to sleep really well the closer it gets to the game. I try to eat really well the closer it gets to a game, and just little routines. So I would always now do my prehab before I go out and train. I always have my set of exercises before every single training session, basically. And when everyone is playing rondos for fun, for example, I lay on the floor and do my hip mobility or my knee mobility, or right, that you're just basically ready for the session. And 5-10 years ago, that was completely different. But now that you're in an age, but also with this maybe history in terms of your body, you just know what's good for you. And I think that's important to find out during that journey what's the best for my body.
Some of it is rational, some of it makes sense. That I'm talking about that routine, that pre-training routine, and some of it, is because I've had, your injuries in the past, so you know how to manage your hips, get your hips ready, get your glutes activated, get your everything, just get everything firing and ready to train. And then some of it is just a routine, and it may not make sense, but there's so many athletes I've spoke to where they don't know why they do what they do, but they know they play well if they do it. So some of it's in the athlete's head. Have you got anything like that, Julia, that is just a routine that you go through that you just know it works, don't know why, but you just know it works?
Yeah, for example, I have that before a game. So every warm-up before a game, like someone has to throw me 10 balls, and I'll just have to control these balls really well. And as long as I didn't manage to get all of these 10 balls controlled really well, I'm not going into the dressing room and get ready for the game. So that's always...
Don't do 11. Don't do 11.
No, don't do
9.
11 and don't do 9. That's also important. And even if the 10th is not good, you have to do it again until you're happy to go and be ready, basically. And I always tell them exactly how to throw the ball. There's basically a throw in. And as soon as I do this, I feel like, okay, now the ball is my friend. We can start the game now. And I think that's important.
The ball is my friend.
Sounds silly. And I always, like, even the girls, like, they would make a comment. But I feel like before that, and if I can't find someone to throw me a ball, I get really stressed. So that's really important for me. And I think that's just a thing in your head, right? But as soon as you've done that and went through that little bit, you're ready to go.
Yeah, I used to play a game, like we used to, something similar in rugby, the rugby equivalent. We used to kick balls at each other and trying to control them and catch it cleanly. And we had a little grid marked out, me and one other teammate who I was good mates with. And we used to do this game, and we used to keep score, and it was the first of 5 to not make a mistake. He beat me every week, and we went on a run. We won every time he beat me. We won, and then I beat him one game, and we lost. And then we both decided, I think we know what way this is going to go in future. I'm never going to beat you. If I get close, he was always better than me anyway. But if I get close, I'm going to throw it just to make sure we maintain the routine. You keep winning and we keep winning. But again, it's that mindset. It's like something psychological there. Tell us a little bit about you. You touched on it there a bit, but like kind of standard processes and standard communication and what coaches want, and then something a little bit unique and bespoke, and then like the players' input, especially from a more mature performer, someone who knows their body well. They know they've got a bit of experience, and they can say, that doesn't work for me. I'm going to take what you've got there, and I'm just going to tweak it a little bit. Tell us a little bit about that breakdown and in how just basically how much input there is from coaches and how much input there is from the individual or from senior players.
I think that's really dependent on the coaches and on the club you're playing in. For example, when we speak about the week routine here in Italy, we just train the whole week towards the game. There's no day off. And I never experienced something like that before. So that's definitely something my body had to adapt to this. So when you think of Monday, like a week, let's say you play on a Sunday and you train from Tuesday onwards, you train every single day. And you don't have that day off 2 or 3 days before a game day where you can quickly reset and recover and fully go out maybe the day before. So that was a little bit of an adjustment and adaptation for myself, for my body. And sometimes I had to drop out in certain sessions because I felt like, and that would be me communicating it and saying to people, look, I know how my body works. I know if I'm not dropping out now, I'll have a problem at latest 2 days after that, and that's the game day. So I'd rather skip a session or a bit of the session to give myself a chance to go through the week in the best possible way and to be ready for the weekend. And that's really, really sometimes a hard conversation, and people might think, okay, why does she not want to train now? And they take it against you. But at the end, you just want to basically be the best for the team, right? And the best benefit for the team. And I think in this, what I said before, in this area or in this perspective, coaches have to open up a bit and give the players' voices a bit more importance, because it's not maybe enough to just ask before a training session if everyone slept well, because you also have to know, like, hey, how do you feel and how will you feel in 3 days if we do this, this, and this? So this clear structure, I always felt like that's something really English, and I liked it a lot in England, in West Ham, when we had the week structured and you would know what to expect throughout the week, with not all of a sudden there turns up a friendly match the next day and you wouldn't even notice, and there's not another day off towards the game. And that, kind of, that's a new experience as well, and you have to deal with this, but you should always be confident enough to also speak out what's best for you. And that might not always be exactly in this moment, but sit your coaches down and say, or the physios or the medical area. And that was a big fight here, especially due to the language barrier. My Italian is okay, I can understand a little bit, and I can also make a joke sometimes, but it's hard when you really speak in depth about your personal physical needs throughout the week. So I've learned that, and maybe that comes with age as well. And obviously there's a fear to not being picked for the starting 11 on the weekend if you miss a training session. But I think it shouldn't be that pressure on you to go through these sessions with pain and to not being able to perform on your best level just because you couldn't skip a part of a training session, for example. I think that's, for coaches, important to put this into consideration as well, just to be able to have the best starting 11 on the weekend. And in terms of communication, you obviously, like, you have the coaches speaking with you, especially if you start, especially here in Milan. They focus a lot, obviously, on the starting 11, and I think that's fair enough, and that's cool. I think in general, it's always also cool for players who not play as much as others, just to take them with you a little bit as well, especially in the beginning of the week, just to not let them out completely of the process, right? I think there's just this, especially with women, they need a lot of communication. They need to feel valued as well. And I think it might be the same with men. It's just having this feeling of being valued and being at the right place, and also the feeling of being important for the team, even if you don't score 5 goals every weekend, but you're still the part of it. And I think that's
we need that too, Julia.
Say this again.
We need that too.
I know.
We need that too.
Boys are more sensitive sometimes than you think, right? And they always think like, the girls just want to talk and the boys don't need that, and they can always be criticized and being taken really rough. Whereas I think there's not so much difference in terms of treating players, because every player needs a little bit of love. And some might work a little bit better if they get a little scream, or if they being taken a little bit more rough. But at the end of the day, it's also, you always need a positive signal as well, whatever that looks like.
Absolutely.
So I think that's important for everyone.
We maybe disguise it better, but we're just as sensitive, and we require the same amount of attention and the same amount of reassurance as anyone else, in my experience.
Yeah, definitely. It's also
here.
the reassurance. The reassurance plays a big part as well, because you try to be at the best level, but there might not always be enough time for everyone to get everyone's personal needs into a week of training, right? So, but just from time to time, you have to have these conversations with all of your players. In an individual conversation with a coach or with the manager means a lot for everyone, whether that's with a 12-year-old girl or with a 35-year-old man, whatever. It's important to have that conversation and to have that focus on you from time to time, and also getting a little bit of a feedback and reassurance, really important.
Yes, absolutely. I agree completely. Julia, the last thing before we finish, Keros, obviously we specialize in communication. You mentioned communication there. Keros provides an alternative to multiple WhatsApp groups, to kind of confusing email threads. Communication is obviously important to you and your experience in other football teams, various football teams. How important is communication that's being delivered to the players, and how much of an impact does it have? Does it follow through into performance?
So first of all, I get this point with confusing WhatsApp and email messages and all these different channels and platforms, and sometimes it's such a mess for me as well. Such a struggle to find what to wear on the match day, what to bring, when training basically starts, and all of a sudden something's changing and you get another email and you can't find the old one. So sometimes, and especially like when you have a lot of games, when you travel a lot, and with having all the swab tests at the moment as well, there's a lot more things going on than maybe in a normal week without a pandemic around you as well, where so many restrictions and you have to follow certain plans in a really structured way. So I think communication on this topic is really important. And with people not being that organized, and I mean basically players with that, is sometimes a big struggle and a mess as well in between the team if you just get messages all the time. So I think channeling and canalizing everything into one platform is really important. And if you just know, okay, I have this platform and everything is on this platform and I can find all of my information needed on this platform, I think is a big benefit. Because for me as well, sometimes emails just disappearing and I can't find them anymore. And then you have to text other players or teammates or the manager when to meet the next morning, or what to bring, simple things like this. Or you forget something, you just don't bring your passport because you didn't know that's happening that day. Little things like this can make it a lot harder if you just not being organized on one platform. So I think communication, especially in a professional environment where a lot of people working in as well, and you have your staff, you have your players, then you have injured players, and then you have different plans for everyone. And we, for example, always stay in a hotel before the night before a game, and that's again something that has to be organized, where to park and when to leave the training facilities and so on. And I think that's a big struggle, and I have so many emails and sometimes I can't find the right one.
Yeah, and you're right. People maybe who aren't athletes or haven't been there maybe think that some of that stuff's trivial, but it has an impact. It takes up cognitive space. It takes up cognitive load, and it's a distraction. And there's always the uncertainty around, have I missed something? And that can add a little bit of stress. And we talked about, changes of routines and how that stress can kind of impact performance. So that's really interesting to hear that.
Sorry, for example, I missed the team meeting once because it changed all of a sudden, and I wasn't in the squad because I was injured at this time, and they changed the structure for the next day. And I didn't read the email in total because it was towards the match plan and the match day schedule. And when you're not in the squad, it might not be your biggest interest to read what's going on match day for the players who are actually in the squad. So I just missed the whole team meeting just because I didn't open the file. And that obviously, as you say, it brings a little bit of distraction for everyone. Not only for me, which is stressful already, turning up with not being there for the team meeting, and also for the coaches who have to think of the right punishment, but also for other players because they feel like, oh, we're not disciplined, or something little. At least it's a little distraction. It takes a little bit away from the focus for the game, and it shouldn't happen. I shouldn't have missed that. I should have just read the whole email. But at the same time, maybe you can understand it if that's not your focus, and if you got already 20 emails that week. And definitely an important topic. I agree on this.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting to hear. Julia, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience. And maybe next time, I know you were giving yourself a hard time about your English. Your English is infinitely better than my German or Italian. Maybe next time we'll revisit this and do it in German or Italian, and will teach me a lesson. You'll not be so humble then.
I would love that,
But,
really. No, I would really love that. So thanks for having me. It was still a pleasure, even English, and I tried my best. I hope it's understandable.
It was great, Julia. Thank you so much for coming on, and enjoy that sunshine in Milan.
Thank you so much. I'll send you some sun rays.
Sounds good. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you.